Okay, so I'm Emily Brackett, and I'm here with Maddie Purcell. Today, we're going to talk about how to build a brand that the market wants. This is our third webinar in a series that we have been doing called From Accidental Entrepreneur to Intentional Business Owners. Over the past 2 weeks, we have already covered the question of, are you ready to start a business, and what's your big idea, how to develop an idea for a really strong business. Those recordings are available at the Branding Compass YouTube channel. And also this webinar will be recorded, and we will email you the recording probably tomorrow, and then it will be archived on the Branding Compass YouTube channel. So be there for you at any time. So I'll start with some introductions. So again, I'm Emily Brackett. I am owner of 2 companies. I started Visible Logic the day before 9/11 in 2001. I had a series of other jobs at graphic design studios. I had been laid off from 2 out of the 3 of them. I started to realize that really graphic design maybe was not as stable a career choice as I had initially thought. And I did make the decision after getting laid off in the summer of 2001 to start my own design firm. I took the summer off to kind of grieve a little bit, think about what I wanted to do, and eventually on Monday, September 10th, I said, okay, I'm going to do this, and the next day was 9/11. So with our current economic situation, I just immediately felt this recognition of, like, people are probably thinking about starting businesses right now. For maybe they've been thinking about it for a while, and this just happened to be the time that it's happening for them. Or you may have lost your job and suddenly thinking about, what is a side gig? I could make a full-time gig, or just deciding that I don't want to look for another job. I really want to be more in control. So that's Visible Logic. So Visible Logic is a full-service branding firm. We do naming, logo design, website design, and a lot of content-focused marketing. More recently, I developed Branding Compass, which is a web-based software. It gives automated expert branding advice. It helps small business owners to discover the best words, fonts, visuals, and typefaces for their branding, and helps them write a unique value proposition, among many other things. So I did that more recently. It's live, and it's still early stage as a software startup. And with me is Maddie Purcell, and I will let her introduce herself.
Hey everybody. So one of the reasons I was excited to work on this webinar series with Emily is because so much of what we were talking about are things that it took me like 2 years to learn as I was starting businesses, and branding specifically, I just like did not understand the concept or what was important to focus on and what wasn't, that kind of thing. So I'm hoping for anyone who's in similar shoes to I was, that today will be very accelerating in the process. But I got into entrepreneurship without a lot of background. I'd always been like starting projects and things growing up, but didn't see business and that like specific, like even for profit or anything like that as a potential career avenue. And so I was like trying to find someone else's box to fit into, and eventually read some books that sparked some things and decided to try entrepreneurship, and have figured that out on the fly. So started Fyood Kitchen. It's creative cooking competition parties. We are on hiatus from live events, obviously, due to coronavirus, and testing how we create the same connection and fun and create creative outlet that we're able to in person through other means right now. But in normal times, we do team building parties, birthdays, bachelorettes, like family nights out, all kinds of different group gatherings. And I'm going to talk a little more as we go through this about the branding parts and how we've sort of like trialed and errored our way into things that work. And then in 2019, so just this past late fall, I launched Portland Rising, which is a professional women's ultimate team, the first pro women's team of any sport in the state of Maine, which turned 200 this year, so that was slightly overdue. But it's just been such an incredible pleasure getting to create a brand from scratch, but with the knowledge of how to create a brand now, and putting the important pieces in right, and then seeing how much that accelerates the process, but also magnifies the impact that we're able to have right off the bat. So we'll talk a little bit about the Rising brand too, but that's where I am today.
Great. So we're gonna look at what you need to do in 4 big steps: create, explain, brand, and then market. So for create, this is really, what are you selling? Is it a product or a service? For those of you who joined us or watched the video from last week where Maddie walked through her process for coming up with a great idea, you may at this point just have a prototype or even an idea, and that's okay. But there is somewhat of a what there, as like, what are you, selling here? That is the first thing, is to define that. We've spent a lot of time on that on the previous webinar, so we're not going to spend too much time here. But when you do that, I do want you to be thinking about your business model. That may not be a phrase that you're familiar with, and if you're not, business model means essentially, how are you going to make money? A lot of professional services people pay, they just charge by the hour, for example. Or you could pay, for the example what we did, like maybe it's a flat fee for a logo or a website. It might be per event, like Maddie is going to sell tickets for Portland Rising, but she also is going to get income through sponsors. If it's a software, it could have a one-time fee or it could have a recurring fee. Often if it's a consumer product, it's usually just the price to buy it one time. But you need to be thinking about how that works from the beginning. And especially, again, if you're in this position of suddenly putting something together, many of us, unfortunately, underprice our services. Like you might be thinking, well, I'm just going to kind of do a few freelance hours of consulting work. And you know what, 20 bucks an hour would be great for me to earn right now. But that's maybe not sustainable when you eventually need to buy a new laptop, or you eventually are going to maybe go back and rent an office space or attend a conference, or not have billable hours all the time. That's the number one thing. You're going to need some time to do your marketing. So you either need to pay somebody to do your marketing, or your time will be spent doing marketing and you can't be billing for that. So think about, make sure that whatever you're coming up with has a business model that is profitable for you, as well as, of course, of interest to the marketplace. And unfortunately, this is kind of the easy part. As Thomas Edison said, genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. So the idea here is like, you've done this, you've come up with an idea, and that is just the start. So Maddie, do you want to talk now a little bit about how you went from kind of having your idea of Fyood to just getting the initial launch?
Yeah, so it talked a lot about starting Fyood and like the process of finding an idea and things like that last week. So feel free to go back and check that out if you were not on. But one of the tricky things about this first step is having enough information and like chutzpah and decisiveness to move ahead while leaving room for yourself to learn more about the idea or the solution or what it is that you're offering as you go. Fyood, for instance, I mean, our pitch the entire first year was about like cooking isn't fun anymore. Or for too many people, cooking's just a list of chores. And so we thought what we were doing with Fyood was like providing this way for people to have a lot of fun cooking. And certainly that happens at Fyood. But what we discovered over time was that the real reason people were doing it was to build connection and to like overcoming. So we use mystery basket ingredients at Fyood to start the challenge. We usually play 2 rounds, split into several teams. Each team gets the same basket of mystery ingredients. And working together to solve this challenge of these ingredients that like do not necessarily go together, you maybe haven't cooked with before, something that takes a lot of like really applicable collaboration and creativity and sense of humor and all these things. And it's those benefits that end up being why people really love Fyood and want to come back and want to refer their friends. So the initial problem we thought we were solving was like, it's not even the full point. It's certainly part of the picture. But even once you have the idea, let the excitement and inspiration of it drive you forward. And I know some people on the call already have ideas and are following them, or are well beyond that stage. But regardless of this stage, I've found it very helpful to keep a sense of humility about checking in with the idea and not assuming because I thought I knew something at one point that new information hasn't changed that.
Great. So what I like to think of as the next step, I call it explaining it. You could think of this as a value proposition, an elevator pitch, but you need to start practicing explaining how your product or service is going to help your customers. And help may not feel like the right word. For example, like in Maddie's case, going to participate in a Fyood contest. It's not really like I have a pain that she's eliminating. I'm helping bring some fun into my life. So it doesn't have to be so serious always, but what are the benefits? And many people, it's very typical to get really hung up on the features, like, well, the cooking contests are going to have this, this, and this, and you're going to be able to do this, and this is how you buy it, et cetera, et cetera. And those are important pieces to work out, but focusing in on why somebody really wants to do this. And that begs the next question is like, who will buy it? Who's going to be of interest? Who will be most interested in your product or service? And we probably all have thought of some time where you're like, yeah, I'm trying to explain this idea to my mom or my grandma, and they just don't get it. But you in your mind are convinced that it's still a great idea. And that may be true, right? It's not everybody who's going to be interested and who would pay money for your product or service. But you want to balance having enough demand with having a focused niche of ideal customers that you're relying on. And they're easier to get if you can identify. So on the one hand, you may be, and I'm going to use an example that's maybe not that relative right now, but you're going to start a new coffee shop. And if there's already 10 coffee shops in your town, how is there really enough demand for another coffee shop? You need to make sure there's a sufficient size of people to buy your product or service. On the other hand, it's much more common for new entrepreneurs to think that, hey, anybody will love my product. I can sell this to anybody. And right, that's probably true when you think of how many people drink coffee. It is probably the vast majority of adults, but that doesn't mean they have any interest in changing their routine to go to your coffee shop. They already make coffee at home, et cetera, et cetera. There's many reasons why you cannot command their attention. So you may start thinking about what is going to really pique the interest of a specific group of people. So when they hear about it, they are definitely excited and they're ready to buy. And so that's really balancing out there what is the competition. The competition may look very similar to what you do if you're starting a fairly traditional business like a restaurant, professional services like an accountant, a lawyer, a photographer, a plumber. Those are known entities that are out there. It's going to be about differentiating yourself from the marketplace. If you're doing something more unique, let's say if the Fyood kitchen, there's other food competitions that somebody could choose, they're probably maybe like, hey, instead of doing Fyood tonight, I'm going to just go out with friends to a bar, or I'm going to do a paint your own pottery session, or those types of other activities that you wouldn't say are one for one doing the same things, but they're what people are considering as options as for sort of their allotted budget that they're going to spend in this area. So you need to look out who's out there, how can I be different from them? And when you can easily and clearly tell your story and people get it, then you are on track, okay? When you have a vision that excites people, that people are like ready to break open their wallet, you have a vision that not only are customers ready to buy into, but you will have a foundation for your brand. It will start to tell you these are the little threads that are really important, certain benefits, certain qualities, certain attributes. And when you can do that, and you can just do this by practicing telling people about it, verbally emailing people about it, maybe posting on social media on your personal account right now, when you can tell it and people are really interested and get excited, that's when you know you're onto something that's going to really work, not only to have a profitable business, but to drive your branding and marketing. And you have to realize I laid out these 4 steps at the beginning as suggesting it's always 1, 2, 3, 4, but we all know that's not the case. This may be like, as you're trying to explain this to people, you realize nobody are getting it, or people are hooking on to another part of what you are as a feature of your product or service, as Maddie was giving that example about what people are really interested in at Fyood Kitchen. So Maddie, why don't you talk a little bit about how you continue to look at what is working and then making adjustments?
Yeah, so starting out, one of the big tenets of Fyood was related to feeling that it wasn't fair that only like chefs and a few other professionals got to do this creative, competitive cooking experience that seems so much fun and so engaging. Like, why can't folks without a lot of cooking experience or, just for fun do this kind of thing? And so I got really invested in the sort of like accessibility angle of it. And for that reason, it made me feel like I needed to have a model where like any just neighbor, any person off the street could sign up for this and do it. And that was like the differentiating factor of Fyood as a cooking competition. And so because of that, I was really resistant to team building for a very long time, because I felt like that was sort of a barrier. Like, it was exclusionary if we were marketing towards groups where you had to already be part of a different group to be able to do it. Like, you couldn't be like, this sounds fun for me, I want to come do it. And so we were consumer only, like selling to individuals, birthday parties, bachelorettes, that side of things. But after our first year, where we started making some money and like having repeat business and things like that, I sat down to look at our data and track which types of events sold for how much. And what I found, I would have guessed going into that data session that like maybe 30% of our events were team building. It turned out it was 70% were team building. And they were also the most profitable. And so it was like the data was extremely clear on that one, that there was a huge value to, even if we weren't going to like get rid of birthdays and bachelorettes and more like community level opportunities to come play, which we haven't and we won't, putting a lot of our marketing focus towards team building events was a better business proposition. It made more sense. And what I realized when I finally accepted that is that, at least here in Maine, like corporate events are still just your neighbors. Like it's not like that's really a line that excludes a lot of folks. And sometimes it's LL Bean and IDEX, and sometimes it's design firms with 9 people, like the whole range of sizes. So I had an assumption there that turned out not to be helpful for for my value proposition and my bottom line and things like that. And so how to apply this is thinking about what you need to track to understand who your customers are as you go. Like, there will be some starting point. You've got to start somewhere to market effectively. But how will you know in 6 months or in a year if you're talking to the right people, or if who you thought your ideal customer was really is? And one tool that was helpful for me in visualizing that initially is something called the business model canvas. You can Google it. And it's another one of those things where, like, you don't want to get locked into what you write down the first time, but being forced to write down, you know, here are my key partners, here are who I think my ideal customers are, here's how I reach them, like what channel, which we'll talk about a little later, was a helpful tool for me.
Okay. So now we're going to get into brand. So let's start, this is going to be real quick, you know, defining what is a brand or branding. It is a word with many, many meanings. To begin with, it can be a way of just usually meaning a company, like a business. So people will talk about the Nike brand, the Target brand, the Starbucks brand, and they essentially mean the company. One reason people use brand versus company is because, like, Hellmann's mayonnaise is probably owned by a larger food company, like Dove is owned by Unilever, etc. So it becomes like the name for a product. And people also think about it in terms of like their trademark, the visible trade name. Sometimes there's a trade name which is different than the legal entity. So those are all things that why people might just say, oh, like you'll see it in the business section. These are the top brands, you know, on the S&P 500 or something, that type of use of the word. Also, it clearly is usually often tied to the idea of your visuals. So it could mean your logo. Your logo is certainly a key visual component of a brand, but it also can be other visuals. There's a lot of really successful companies out there that have created very rich brands by focusing on always consistently using colors, fonts, photography, or illustrations in a very clear way that's highly recognizable. Like, as an example, if you use like Headspace, that app is a great one. They use a very clear, limited color palette. They use the same illustrative styles for everything they do. They're a great benchmark to consider if you want to understand how you can build a brand much beyond your logo. So people may talk about, oh, I got to work on my branding, and they really mean their visual style. The third definition is a promise. I do find this one the most sort of abstract and can be very challenging to wrap your head around, but it's really important to keep in mind. And I think the biggest thing is, like, what do people expect when they hear or see your brand? Eventually, your brand, when it becomes so well known, something happens, like your customers and the marketplace start putting value on it or attributes to it that are beyond your control. You can try to build up this, whatever promise you want. An example is Volvo. When people think of Volvo, you don't get a Volvo because it's sexy or fast. You get it because it's safe. You assume everything they do, any extra money, why it's so expensive, is because it's safer. And that's what we come to expect. Similar to that, if you are a person trying to build a personal brand, it's really your reputation, right? Again, we know people, you're like, oh yeah, I expected her to be late because she's always late, that type of thing. Or she's super reliable. She always follows through on what she says she's going to do. That idea of a reputation is similar with a brand. And then eventually, you know, celebrities, for example, can turn their personal brands into something closer to a corporate brand. You know, we see this with Oprah or Martha Stewart or Kim Kardashian, those types of people who are able to take a personal name, but then make it into something far more than the person itself. And I tend to use the word branding as a verb, a process. It's the process of creating your visual identity. I need to work on my branding. So consciously developing a visual identity that highlights what you do and your unique benefits. Clarifying how you're different than your competitors and starting to translate into specific like visuals, words, whether they are copy on a web page or on a printed brochure or spoken through customer service types of interactions are a really important part of brand. And again, those interactive experiences, and by that I mean it could be the feeling of an app on a phone and how wonderful it is to use or frustrating it is to use, or certainly when we get back to in-person experiences, that's definitely a part of it. Is it friendly? Is it fun? Is it energetic? Is it calming? Those are all sorts of things that you want to use to develop this really emotional, immersive feeling and being separate and different than anything else in the marketplace. So that's just the rundown of the words brand and branding. If you're wondering and you didn't understand why you didn't understand it, that's why, because it's very confusing. But one point I really want to make here is, and you may have heard this, your brand is not your logo. I hope I've made that point of like, your brand means so much more than the logo. It can be a really important visual identifier for your product or service, but it's really not the most important. In fact, most people are making a mistake when they start with these very specific executions of their brand identity, like getting started with your logo, your marketing, and your website when you have not developed and identified what your real benefits and differentiators are, who your ideal customer is, what your unique value proposition is, and then those really more general brand attributes and traits, you are going to be frustrated with the results of your logo or website or marketing. It's going to be continually off base because the chance of you hitting that target when you haven't done all those preliminary steps it's just very unlikely to have happened. So every good branding decision should support what you offer, it makes sense with just your general product or service. It reinforces and never contradicts your benefits, and it attracts your ideal customer. For those of you here who are local to Portland, Maine, which is where Maddie and I are, I don't mean to be picking on this company, but I use them as an example a lot. There is a flotation company, and you go in there and it's like you get to float in the tank, and it's they turn up all the lights, and so you're in sensory deprivation. And the people who started that business, their last name happens to be Harder, and so it's called Float Harder. And I always thought, that's not, I want this to be effortless. I want this to be calming. So I always feel like they really just missed, they are not reinforcing, they are contradicting the benefits by that choice of their brand. And I also don't expect it to be like this hands-on service there where I really need to see Mr. and Mrs. Harder do this. So there's not really a reason for that personal naming. So I also have another example, if you're not familiar with that company. I think this starts to bring to mind how on the left we have these are both in the sphere of like personal products. One is a little bit more of a cleaning solutions, and one is more makeup, but they both probably do shampoos and hand washes, etc. So on the left, you see Common Good. They have this very minimal looking design. What does that bring to mind? I start thinking, okay, this doesn't have a long list of like ingredients I don't recognize because it's very simple. There's hand done illustrations, which make me think, oh, this is maybe good for my body because this feels safe and comfortable and something done by hand. In fact, maybe this brand started as somebody who created it in their kitchen. It's obviously very clean. I do think you're going to get like a nice, clean you know, finished dishes, etc., with the product. On the right, I see a lot of energy. I see just a lot of stuff to look at. I'm thinking, hey, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna have a great fun night out on the town when I put my makeup on. So you just really see that they can start to bring to mind what the experience is going to be to use these brands, maybe what the ingredients are of the brands, etc., with their visual style. And it works because it's built on how they defined their attributes and who they want to be attracted to their product or service. And so let's talk about what's essential and what you can wait on. You need a name for your business. I recommend having a word mark first. That is just a very specific way of typesetting your business name. It doesn't need a little graphic icon or symbol, AKA logo. We all want a logo, it sounds really fun, but a word mark is perfect. It's something that can be created very inexpensively. You can use a service like Branding Compass, you can use a designer and they can do these very quickly. Potentially you could do it on your own. You need a word mark, but you don't need anything beyond that. You should start thinking pretty early on of consistent colors. That color will probably pull from your logo, and then you may have an expanded color palette beyond that. Color is very, very important for people to make a way of becoming memorable, making your brand memorable, you know, and so starting to choose a color. Sorry, got the Sorry, I hope we don't have a whole line of those guys going by. So consistent colors, I think, is really important. Start thinking about distinct photography, imagery, or font style. You could see that in those two package designs. And depending on what you're doing, it may be in your website or in your social media posts. But start defining what that would be and always using that same style. Nowadays, I do think you need a website. Like if somebody said to me they're gonna try to build a business without a website, I think that would be crazy. There's a lot of different ways to build websites. It can be extremely simple, but you need to have a website. It sort of is like, yes, I'm really legitimate, has basic contact information. It really should essentially tell your value proposition. It should start developing this visual style of having consistent colors and typography and imagery. But finally, what you don't really need right now is a logo. A logo can wait. So Maddie, do you want to talk a little bit about how you went through the steps of what you did now and what you waited on?
Yeah. So this entire branding as a concept I mentioned at the beginning is something that took me a long time to wrap my head around. I definitely thought it was a logo at first, and took me a while to understand the full scope of it. One thing that helped, and Emily touched on this, so the way I think of it is brand is like, I can't create my brand and have that necessarily be the eventual brand, because what other people, how they react to it, how they feel about it, is what the brand ends up being. It's like co-created with the community or the customers or things like that. So I can do my best to like shape things in a direction that then they'll understand what I'm hoping the brand feels like for them. And a great way to find out what your customers think about it early on is in feedback, things like that. Be like, what are 3 words that describe my brand, my company? And if you start seeing the same words a bunch of times and either they're surprising or they are in line with what you think, that can be good data. For branding, one of the things that I enjoy most in the process is naming. And I've gone through a couple different processes with that. With Fyood at the beginning, I didn't have a name. I just knew it, like I had a concept and I wanted to start testing, but I didn't know exactly what the end product was going to look like. So during the test runs, I called it the cooking game, which, you know, we could have stayed there. eventually I spent a couple days with a whiteboard. I was like, oh, this just doesn't feel right. Like it's not as exciting as I want it to be. It's not as unique as I want it to be. I got really attached to the idea of having something that could be a verb, and it has become one. So like Google, like you're gonna go Google something, are you playing Fyood or are you feuding? Having that as an option. Fyood, for those who haven't spent as much time with it as I have, so it's Fyood, and it's food feud, a pun, a mashup, neologism, and that has been pretty on brand with what Fyood is. There are a lot of puns, there's a lot of like creative combinations that haven't gone together before, but a downside to choosing it, like making up a new word, is that Siri took 3 years to understand if you're like, hey, take me to Fyood. She's like, Feud, where do you want to go? So, there's upsides and downsides to that. And it being something new was great because we could define it, but it's also hard for people to pronounce if they haven't heard it before. They're like, is it Fyood? I'm not sure. So that is like a distancing factor for the brand, for people to understand how to actually connect with it. Want it to be easy for them to say that's something I would maybe do differently in retrospect. But then with Portland Rising, we had this opportunity to start a brand that a lot of people were going to engage with right away, as fans, as potential players, as investors or partners. And so with this one, a lot of our process was thinking about connotations of existing words. So with Fyood, we started from scratch, and now Fyood means what the business is to those who know it. But a lot of people don't know it still. People in other countries have not heard of this, With Rising, we were considering all these different like representations of Maine or of athleticism or of strength or of inspiration that we could use to sort of like jumpstart the process. So Rising, that's something that everyone understands as a concept, and we can then take it's like a hack for starting the brand off with something that people already understand, sort of like a shortcut by using our shared connotations, but obviously has to be in line with where you actually want to go. And then my one other note on brand visualization and branding development is, I tell Emily this all the time, I feel very incapable of designing visually. It's just, I don't think of it as my strong point. And so it's hard for me to be like, ooh, I want the brand to like look like this so it feels like this. Like I can't necessarily define that out of my own head. And so working with someone like Emily or using Brand Compass is extremely helpful for someone like me. But as to get started, if you aren't able to access those resources right away, something I have been able to do, even with very limited visual understanding, is create a mood board by just Googling, like for Fyood, I think I Googled like, I can't even remember the terms right now, but like cooking or excitement, competition, words like that, and finding photos that on Google Images that feel like Fyood. And if I put a whole bunch of those images that feel like Fyood together, then I can sort of back end my way into seeing what the visual looks like.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. Okay, so now we're going to get into the fourth step, which is marketing. You want to create demand or interest in your product or service. So I think the point we've tried to make here all along is you need to have a clear message first, okay? If you have a clear message, it's going to help drive your branding. It's also going to drive your marketing for sure. If you're not clear about who would be interested in your product or service, or what specifically is intriguing about it to that group of people, your marketing is not going to be as effective. It's just going to feel like noise that's out there. So people aren't going to really grasp it and pay attention to it. And you're going to probably be spending a lot of time and or money with poor results. So the most important thing is start where your ideal customers are. So that's why, again, why understanding your ideal customers helps feed your brand and your visual identity. And it's certainly going to help direct where you should be putting your marketing efforts. So I have 7 key sort of marketing strategies or channels that you may want to consider. And I am going to go run through these super fast, talking about what is sort of the pros and cons of each one. So content marketing, what it is. So the idea of content marketing is maybe you're going to write, it could be a blog, it could be on your own blog, it could be articles for other people's blogs, it could be developing videos, webinars, starting a podcast. It's developing and writing and building content on a regular basis. There's 2 real great reasons to do it. One is you can be capturing search traffic. Blogs are especially good for that. People are searching for words and you can write blogs that answer those questions. Most importantly, it also shows your expertise, right? It's a chance. So if this is something where showing that you are an expert in your field is what often gets somebody to want to buy from you, this is a great way to be able to do that. So some of the pros and cons is you can do this in any industry sector or niche. There is a way to do this and make it happen. The problem is it's really time consuming, right? It's a huge endeavor. If you're like, I'm going to start a podcast, is it realistic that you're going to start a blog or a podcast and go with it on a regular basis? It is a lot of work. And the returns may be quite slow. Probably, especially more with a podcast, a blog, you might start getting some search traffic more quickly, but it's a long haul type of approach, but it can have a lot of great return, but probably not immediately. SEO, search engine optimization. So one of the great things about this is if you can find people who are searching like when they're ready to buy. They may be searching for the very product or service that you offer. So that is really great. Some of the pros and cons here are that the basics of SEO are quite easy. You should be adding, title tags, making keyword-rich content. There's tons of information on the web about how to do the basics of SEO. The problem is the more complex work is very hard. You probably actually want to use some tools to do some real keyword analysis to help you understand what words you should be using, comparing the value of different words. And you may need to do some technical optimization of your website, which would involve, somebody who really knows the coding pretty well. So there's kind of some quick wins, but it can be quite a burden to keep refining this type of strategy. Social media, what that is, that means posting, sharing, or paying for promotions and ads on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, et cetera, YouTube. So you've probably, I'm guessing, heard a lot of people talk about why Facebook ads, for example, are so great because you can target, right? You can say, hey, I'm looking for people in this age, in this geographic location, in this interest, et cetera, and there is a lot of ways you can really find those audiences. And similarly, the real benefit is probably your own website, especially at the beginning, gets very little traffic. And these are platforms that millions and millions of people go on every day. So that's the opportunity to scoop up people where they already are. You certainly want to be, if you have a B2B service, LinkedIn is probably more effective than Facebook. If you have a consumer product, Instagram is great. People are, using that all the time for those types of things. So you need to be thinking about where your likely clients or customers would be. You do definitely need to be thinking that you probably are not going to have a real effective social media marketing effect if you don't pay for ads or promotions or boosting, et cetera, to just think, I'm just going to be there out there posting and sharing without any sort of paid piece of it, you will have very low reach for what you're doing. Then paid ads, obviously this is from the traditional print ads and radio ads to, you know, Google pay-per-click, display ads, etc. There's so many opportunities for paid ads, and the benefits is that, especially with digital ads, they can be really trackable. Who clicked, you know where they were, you know what ad they saw, you know where they went and what they did from then on. So it can be really great. For years, one of the benefits that people were always touting, although it's very hard to, you know, put an ROI on, is just brand recognition. So even if nobody does anything to click on an ad, the fact that they've seen your logo and your messaging as it scrolls by social media, or it's a display ad on their newspaper site, etc., you are building some brand recognition along the way, even if it doesn't convert to a click. Obviously, this is all pay. This is pretty much all, you know, you got to pay for ads. So some things can be very expensive. If you are able to really target the audience for a digital ad or use a trade publication, it can be worthwhile because you know you're targeting the right people and it's worth it for that cost. But you just may not have the budget right now to be considering it. The next one, networking and referrals. So this is in-person networking, public speaking, referrals from one customer to another, word of mouth advertising. This is basically very low cost, and one of the real benefits is it builds trust. Obviously, right now we're not in a great situation for that, but many professional services companies, you know, whether they're individuals or companies, get most of their client base from this type of referral. So it could be going to a networking event and introducing yourself. It could be actually speaking at an event, or just getting your current customers to refer you to other customers. When you do that, you've built so much trust in that face-to-face interaction that, like, what they see on your website, etc., is not as critical. You've already sort of been pre-screened through this effort. But right now, it's not as viable potentially as it used to be. But this is probably the #1 way that most solopreneurs get the majority of their business, friends and family who know them. Next, email marketing. So what is email marketing? This could be an e-newsletter, or it could be more promotional email. So the difference being, an e-newsletter might be thought of as a content marketing strategy. Show your expertise, talk about past successes, testimonials, those kind of things. Or it could be really promotional, where we think of like the emails we get from LL Bean and Old Navy, etc., like promoting some sort of special sale. The benefit is, if you look at any research, it really has the best ROI, which is return on investment of any channel. The money that you put into it is almost always gets returned at a higher rate of, you know, actual purchases than any other channel. If you're in the professional services area, it's a way to show off your expertise. It can be part of a larger marketing automation system. Probably the biggest thing is that you need to have a list, right? So a lot of people don't have a list at the beginning, so you need ways to grow your list. So you may be growing your list by trying to do something to promote people to join your list by making a piece of content that interests them, or they reach out by social media and they click through to something that gets them to join your list. Or it could be people who, if you're selling something and it's an online, you then get those customers. So the good thing is you own these contacts, but if you don't have very many at the beginning, it can be a hard place to start. And the last one is press, which is reaching out to the press to have them write a story about you, or sometimes you can submit your own articles. So this is also called PR. Puts your business in front of a large audience. People really feel that validation of like, wow, this company or this business owner was written up in the local paper or a large, you know, publication. That's really, people still feel a lot of validation from traditional press. It can be challenging though, because you just may not have a business that would be of interest to the media. Like consumer products are definitely more interesting. If there's something about your story as to, how you've overcome adversity to start this business, which maybe there'll be a lot of inspiring stories of that right now. But the reality is if you have a very technical business in a niche field, it may be challenging to get general press coverage. There might be a trade publication that would be interested in. And it can be pretty time consuming. It can feel very hit or miss, potentially not as systematic as like a marketing automation platform can. So I just ran through those all really quickly because I want you, this is the most important thing with the marketing right now, is like you can't do everything. And you're going to be hearing people, oh yeah, you should do Facebook ads. Oh, you should start an email campaign. Oh, have you tried getting a story in the paper? All of those are viable, but what is going to be most important to you? I want you to walk away from this and say, I'm going to choose one or maybe two marketing strategies, and I'm going to choose them because that's where my ideal clients are, okay? Probably the second piece of that is like, what do you feel comfortable doing? Like some people would not want to do a podcast. They don't feel comfortable speaking. Some people don't feel comfortable writing. They wouldn't want to do a blog. So it needs to be something that you can execute on, but do it where your ideal clients are. Because the flip side of that is if you're like posting all this social media on Facebook because you're comfortable there, but your clients are not there, then it's not going to be an effective campaign for you. So Maddie's gonna kind of finish this off with talking about the one or two strategies that she's focused on.
Yeah, thanks for the rundown, Emily. Definitely spent a lot of time being distracted by like, oh, I should try this, or like, what if this works early on, especially when things weren't working and I was like scraping for a replicatable strategy that would help drive business. It was tempting to try everything, but the things that worked for Fyood. So I was gonna tell you about two other ones, but our sales have been driven at least a third by SEO. I wasn't going to talk about it because we don't use it on an ongoing basis, but we did invest in the setup of like, what are people looking for when they're like, I want to plan a bachelorette party, or like, what's the best team building activity or something like that. So setting up just on those search terms and making sure we show up in search has been huge for the business. But we don't like write a blog to keep working on SEO or anything like that right now. So the strategies that have been most helpful for us, the first one is the networking side, so primarily word of mouth and referrals. Our product is really solid, and so that means that we've gotten to a place where from every event we do, we get a referral for at least one more event just from doing it. So like it's a self-fulfilling circle, which is an awesome place to start from. And so word of mouth and referrals are important, and we honestly haven't even like put a lot of effort into encouraging that. We haven't done like, codes for your friends or anything. It's just been like organic buzz. But then the other thing in networking that we found out, we were doing a strategy meeting sometime a year ago, and one of the key things that came up was more Maddie, more sales. So like if I'm going to events or speaking at things or just out in the world, then that tends to drive a lot of organic sales as well. So networking and then PR is the first one that has an external focus that we were able to systematize. And it's another workshop that I give pretty regularly now, how to bootstrap PR to build your business. But it does have its risks for sure, because you can't control the story the way you can with some of the other channels. You can't necessarily ensure that exactly what you want to write gets written, but there are ways that you can shape it to be effective for you or make sure you're going to the right places. But then for things that haven't worked, social has been an incredible place for Fyood because we have so much beautiful content. It's photos of people having fun in this gorgeous kitchen and cooking and dishes and things like that, like plates, of food. So we have all this content, but it doesn't drive sales. But we still invest in the strategy on a marketing level, because if someone Googles us and goes to the website, they're like, hey, what's this about? They're gonna go to our Instagram too and be like, yeah, but what does it feel like? What does it look like? So our platform of choice there is Instagram for the visual and Insta Stories for behind the scenes of Fyood. And email, paid ads, and content marketing are things that we've tested and seen like almost zero return from for a lot of work put in. So those just aren't right now the priorities for our business. But again, this is an area where want to make sure, you know, like at the end of the year, okay, 30% came from SEO, 30% came directly from networking, 40% from PR. If that shifts next year, then we want to make sure we're investing in the places that are actually connecting with our customers.
Yeah, great. So we've run quite long with content, so we're going to wrap it up, but we do have time for questions, and if people want to hang on, we can answer them. So start going ahead and entering any questions you have into the question box as we wrap things up here. So again, these are the 4 main steps. Create, be able to explain the benefits, start creating your visual brand and your experience brand, and then market it. But what you're gonna find is that you're gonna keep repeating, refining and repeating. It may be that you're very successful adding and expanding your products and services, and then you have to kind of go through this whole thing again. Or it may be that you're back to the drawing board a bit and pivoting, and then you're gonna do some of this work again. So those are the sort of the order and the steps, but you probably will be looping through it many times. So we are going to jump to questions. If you've heard more about Branding Compass and are interested in using it, I want to offer you this coupon code to save $10 off of it. As a reminder, Branding Compass will help you write a unique value proposition. It will give you recommendations on the best colors, fonts, and visuals for your brand. We can develop a wordmark logo for you. Licenses start at $99. And so with this coupon code, you get $10 off. We will email you this as a reminder as well. And Maddie is always offering great information to the community. So these are this is Maddie's Instagram and Facebook connections. Those are the best ways. She said Instagram. Maddie, I'll let you just quickly tell how people should stay in touch with you.
Yeah, so I've just found that a lot of the connections locally, but also not distance related, have happened on social. And so if like, for instance, if you are in the pre-idea stage and working through a process and are like, hey, I'm thinking about this, or hey, I'm stuck on this or something, and it would be helpful, I'd love to chat about it. Some other topics that I give workshops on already are PR and how to use it, crowdfunding, and then just personal development and like organization and things like that have helped me in becoming a better business owner and like happier human. So if you would like to stay connected, social is a great place for that. And I sometimes post updates about Portland Rising or Fyood Kitchen as well. So you can find those on their own or all of the above.
Great. So we're going to go into questions. We have a few that have come in, but it's not too late. Go ahead and enter any questions you have into that little GoToMeeting panel there. So the question is, I have different typical clients. So, you know, I have more than one ideal client. How do I market and brand for each of them? So I'll start, Maddie, and then you can jump in if you want. Excuse me. Obviously, this is very common. You may find that you have radically different end users or customers depending on what you do, or maybe just sort of slight shift in what they care about. The most important thing that I want to stress is that branding should be universal, but your marketing should be targeted. Meaning your branding should be consistent. There should be consistent use of visuals. There should be consistent overall tone, but your specific marketing activities should be very targeted, and they will be more effective if they're targeted. So for example, you might highlight different benefits to different people. You may advertise or use or promote in social media, paid social media campaigns on different platforms, depending on who you're, trying to attract. But you should never have messaging that contradicts your overall brand feelings. So that's definitely what I think is branding is universal, marketing should be targeted. Do you have anything to add on that, Maddie?
Yeah, what we did for Fyood, because of doing a bunch of different type of group events, was we created a sales page for each of them. So if you look up like Fyood Kitchen Bachelor Party, you're going to get to a different page than Fyood Kitchen Team Building Event. And honestly, a lot of the content is the same. It's just making the person who gets to that page feel at home with like knowing that we have capacity for what they're doing. But also I think, especially starting out, there can be this fear that you have to talk to everyone or they won't buy from you. Like if I don't post about birthday parties, no one will ever book a birthday party. Not necessarily true. So if you have to choose or honestly, even for the best, to just have a very focused message, talking to one group doesn't mean that other groups won't buy from you. And it can even increase that. Like for instance, we post very rarely about kids' birthday parties on our social, but we get parents reaching out all the time. And a lot of the time it's not the right fit. Like for instance, our minimum age is 12. We get a lot of folks whose kids are into like, oh shoot, they're all of these cooking shows. And they'll be like, hey, we're turning 6, like, can we come do a party with you? And the tables are like 3 feet high, like the 6-year-olds are going to be underneath that. So it's not the right fit, but they see us marketing to other people and are like, oh, maybe that would be great for my kid, even though we're not talking to them. So I think a common thing at the beginning is to fear that you have to talk to everyone or else you won't sell. And you can trust that if you're talking to the right people, and like have a clear message, other people will also be interested, for better or for worse.
Yeah, I would agree. You do want whoever's like really your ideal client to come to your website or see your social media post or whatever and be like, oh yeah, that's me. I can relate to that and I want to buy or participate in that. Okay, we have one more question here, which is, do you have any guidelines about what are good things to share on social media? So go ahead, Maddie.
Can you say that one again?
Sure. Do you have guidelines about what are good things to share on social media? So I think that,
yeah,
I would start by saying, you may be thinking like, well, should I do like a cat video or should I be like promoting my products or services? I think, I've heard guidelines before of like, you certainly don't want like every single thing you do to be just like promoting, a hard sell of whatever you're doing. It could be sharing some other content that's related to what you do. So for example, like on my Visible Logic Facebook page, I'm often sharing stories from like Fast Company or Inc. or wherever, where they're talking about great ideas and branding and using design thinking and those kind of things. So it's a way to show your expertise. And you're often like, maybe I'm tending to subscribe to newsletters and read articles that like pique my interest about design, and I'm able to like curate those as like, these are probably what general business owners would be interested in. So I tend to share those. And then I will do some of like, this is recent work we've done, or this is an upcoming webinar we're giving. I do think balancing that between sharing some other content, ideally, especially if you've curated it, versus something that you do yourself. Cat videos would be off-brand for Visible Logic, so I wouldn't do that. But if your brand is like fun and funny and goofy, that might be just the perfect thing.
For Fyood, a lot of what we do, because we know that social is not really a sales channel for us, it's more of like a branding channel. We do a lot of like entertain and inspire type of content. So like, what would you make with this mystery basket of ingredients? Or like, you know, which of these 3 dishes would you give the highest presentation points? So like engagement opportunities. There's also an opportunity for user-generated content. So like, depending on your brand and who you're talking to, it could be how people are using your product and letting new customers see your product in action through the eyes of someone who's a successful user. Social is an interesting one because you own the channel, so you get to say what you want, which means that customers may not like take it at face value if you're doing selling all the time or something like that. So being able to show how someone else thinks about it, or share other content that's not necessarily your own that's relevant, or reviews or things like that, can help for generating trust if you're using it as a sales channel.
Mm-hmm.
But then it also depends on the platform. I mean, what's appropriate in Instagram stories is different from what's appropriate on YouTube and what you would put in a LinkedIn post. So the type of content is really determined, I'd say, first and foremost by your ideal client, and then the channel that you're choosing to put it forward on.
That's a good point, Maddie. Like, you can tell when some of those people have just like blasted out the same like posts to like Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and it's just like, what? This doesn't work on LinkedIn, for example. Like, maybe that worked in Facebook, but it's not working. Often those two are kind of at odds with one another. So definitely think about what channel you're on. Okay, I'm gonna have, I think, just one more question here, which is, do we have any recommended tools for websites and logos? So I do get asked this all the time. I will give you the caveat that we use WordPress and we are professional website designers and developers. If you are trying to build a website yourself, that's probably not the case. So just because I am recommending WordPress, and I would recommend WordPress if you came to me to build your website, that's different than you building it yourself. I would say avoid GoDaddy. They really try to sell you a lot of things and lock you into very inflexible formats with their website and hosting, et cetera, et cetera. And then so, I think Squarespace or Wix or Shopify are the easier to handle as like I don't know code, and they will work fine. For logos, Branding Compass does offer wordmark logos now. It's about $150. I think, again, I would recommend you stick with something simple for your logo. So that's, but there are, so I would tend to find a freelance graphic designer that you if affordability is the biggest issue, probably, rather than some of those like Fivers and stuff where it just seems like you just don't know what you're getting. Any thoughts on that, Maddie?
You're definitely the expert there. One tool, this is probably honestly like not totally kosher to say around real designers, but if you go through something like Branding Compass and you have like your colors and your fonts and things like that, and you're like, oh, but I'm really not skilled at this. How do I put it together? I need a Insta post for tomorrow or something. A tool that I use sometimes is Canva, and it has a lot of like set templates and things like that, which like that's beyond me to put together on my own. But if I have all the elements there, I can like drag and drop, and it's a little bit of a hack for those of us who are less visually talented.
Yeah, no, I love Canva. I think that Canva is a good tool. I do think going through a process like Branding Compass will make it like more easy for you to not be overwhelmed when you get there of like, what should I start with? Oh, I should start with these colors and fonts. So yeah, I think Matt, I love what I love about Canva is that as a new small business owner, you want to feel like I understand that, like not wanting to say go and hire a graphic designer every time you want to do like a newsletter or a social media post. Like that's not a good workflow or, you know, for anybody at the beginning. So go for it with Canva. Yeah, good suggestion. Okay, a couple specific questions. We will share this video, and yes, we would love it if you would share it with your friends. We'll email it to you, and then the link will be a YouTube video, so you can share either the email or the YouTube link. We would love that. We will also share links to Fyood Kitchen and Rising and Visible Logic and Branding Compass and include the coupon code. And then, can you easily transfer from GoDaddy to another platform? Well, not always so easily, and that's one of the things that I really don't like about them, because they really, you can build, for example, a WordPress website on GoDaddy and potentially you could transfer it over. If you are using a like website tonight, you're not going to be able to move it over. And that's kind of the same thing, honestly, with like if you choose Square or Wix, it is hard to move it from one platform to another. Their business model is to get you in and pay monthly, and you're stuck with them. And at some point, you're going to feel that like, okay, I'm going to just rip the Band-Aid off. And usually it's when you're like, I need to rework my website to such a degree that I really don't want to transfer it. I want to redo it, and that's a good time to get off of one platform and move to another. So I think we've run really long already, and so I'm going to wrap it up here. I do encourage you to stay in touch with myself and with Maddie, via either our websites or our social media channels. We would love to help you in any way that we can, and I thank you so much for joining us on these 3 webinars.
Thank you so much. Good luck.
Yes, good luck.